Hello, and thanks for joining me for this presentation, one of a series of TLU Hettinger lectures named in memory of my dear colleague Deborah Hettinger, biology professor here at TLU. It's hard for me to believe that it's been 5 years since she died. She was just such a dear colleague to me, and I miss her still. I so appreciated the chance to teach global perspectives with her many times over. And she just taught me so much about teaching and about learning, and she challenged each one of us to be the very best we could. Today I'm going to talk to you about saving for retirement. I have a few do's and don'ts, and I think it's not going to take me terribly long to make the critical points here. As you can see from the information that's on the first of the slides that I've prepared for you, I'm trying to demonstrate to you how much money will be accumulated by someone who starts saving at age 25 and saves until they retire 40 years later at age 65. I'm assuming that this person can save around $200 a month, $2,500 a year, and that the estimated return rate on this person's savings will be around 6%. And that rate has come down a little bit since the 1990s, and 6% is a pretty conservative rate right now. As you can see from the slide, if you start doing that at age 25, by the time you retire, you should have somewhere around $387,000 in your account. However, if you wait until you're age 35 before you start that savings, you're only going to have a little more than half that, around $198,000. So it really does matter how quickly you can start saving for retirement. It also matters, of course, how much the rate of return is, and we're going to talk some more about that in just a moment. It matters a great deal how much we save each month or every year if we put aside the money on an annual basis instead of a monthly basis. And of course, the main point of this slide is that it truly matters if you start early. The earlier you can start compounding some of those savings, the more you're going to accumulate before retirement. Now, on the next slide, you're able to see here the opportunity to accumulate still more funds if, in fact, you can put your savings money for retirement into an account that carries lower management fees. Just upping the return from 6% to 6.5%, not by changing what you are choosing to put your money into, except for who manages that money, by changing from 6% to a 6.5% return because you lower those fees, you can actually accumulate almost $50,000 more for retirement if you will do that. Now, one of the ways in which you can lower fees is by choosing to use something called a life cycle retirement fund. Sometimes these are called target date funds. And what those do is basically automatically put you into more risky things at the beginning of your working life and gradually take out some of the stocks and shift that to bonds as you get closer to retirement age. Bonds are considered a more conservative investment. They're not as volatile up and down in their values as stocks are. They do go up and down in value, but typically they're not as volatile in terms of the likelihood of loss that stocks could be. So shifting to target date funds or life cycle funds that are geared towards your retirement date can save you a lot of trouble and save some of the fees. In addition to that, if those are not available to you, then another thing you might want to consider is putting your money into something called an index fund. These are mutual funds that try to mimic something like the Dow Jones Industrial Average or the Standard & Poor's 500 average. And those things basically have exceptionally low fees if you're careful to select one of the managers of those kinds of funds that are somewhere between maybe 0.25% and even lower. On the S&P 500 index, for example, if you were to buy something called SPDRs, The SPY is the symbol for that. I think the management fees on there are somewhere around 0.1% a year or something like that. So that'll help you get that savings amount that you want to accumulate before retirement up a good deal higher. Now, a third major point that I want to say here is to be sure always that you do take advantage of any employer matching funds available. I'm always shocked by how many people walk away from that and just leave the employer money on the table because they don't want to participate in an employer managed retirement plan. They're just going to do IRAs themselves on the side. In fact, often employers match as much in a 401k for corporations or for-profit businesses, or a 403b, which is the nonprofit or educational sector retirement plan. Often the match for those is as much as 50% to even 100% or more of matching. For example, for me here at Texas Lutheran, I contribute 3% of my paycheck every month, but TLU matches that with another 6%. So TLU is basically putting in 200% of my contribution. Typically, these contributions have something called a required vesting period, so you have to stay with the institution for a certain amount of time first before you could take that money with you when you leave. You can always take your own, but you can't always take the employer money with you. So it's really important to take that employer money if you can, participate in that plan, and then stay there long enough to claim the employer money as your own if you have to leave that job, if you resign or if you are laid off maybe. Another do on the next slide, what I'm trying to get across to you is that it's very important for you to save a larger portion of your income as soon as you can. Early savings matter and larger early savings matter. Not all of us are lucky enough to inherit $200,000 from great Uncle Tanus or great Aunt Martha when we're 19 or something like that. And that would be great to start out a retirement fund with that at age 25. But it's really important to recognize that even if we can only save 5% at the beginning, save it. But then every single year, try as best you can to pour whatever the raise is that you might get, put it into the retirement fund. Don't let it go into your take-home paycheck. If you never see it in the take-home paycheck, you often won't miss it. It may require that you not increase your living style very rapidly, but nevertheless, it'll build up your retirement funds a lot earlier. And now I want to talk about a don't. If you change jobs, don't cash out your retirement savings. It's dumbfounding to me that I've managed to stick with one employer for 40 years now, but that's extremely unusual. Some of my graduates from 10 or 12 years ago come back to say hello to me when they're on campus, and they drop by and I ask them what they're doing now, and they go through this litany of, well, I moved from blah, 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 and I moved that, and I moved, and it turns out that over that 10 or 12 years they've had 4 or 5 employers. And that sort of makes my hair stand on end because I worry about what that's doing to their retirement. They're probably not staying long enough to be vested in any of those employers' retirement funds. And in most cases, if you're not vested, the employer would rather you pull out your own, and so often they'll give you an extra check at the end that's your balance. And you owe taxes on that unless you can roll that into an IRA or something. So you don't ever want to take possession of that. You want to tell your employer ahead of time, if you're going to refund that money to me, don't write me the check. You write it to so-and-so who's the custodian of my IRA or whatever, and then it will actually stay in a tax-protected wrapper. If you do take that money out, just be sure that you have an IRA set up somewhere that you can roll that over into. Very few employers will let you roll it into the next employer's retirement fund. Finally, the last slide is just sort of the money bag that you hope you're going to have by the time you retire. I really think if you follow these rules that you could end up in pretty good shape at the time you retire. Even at a relatively modest salary, never topping $100,000 in, even in my case, 40 years of employment, you too can accumulate virtually $1 million with prudent saving, low-fee investments, and with moderate risk-taking for adequate returns. $500 a month, 6% return, 40 years. Now that's twice as much as the beginning slide I showed you. $500 a month, you could get up to that in a few years if you roll your increases in salary into that. 6% return 40 years, you're going to be very close to $1 million by the time you retire. Good luck, and I am looking very much forward to seeing your comments or questions, and I'll do my best to respond when I can. Thank you.